Now, Franz Kafka is a literary figure known around the world, but a woman who first translated one of his works is a lesser-known figure. Now, Milena Jesenská is a subject of my next guest's debut historical fiction novel, Letters to Kafka. The book aims to shed a light on and imagine the life of the translator and her relationship to Kafka. Author Christine Estima joins me in studio for Here and Now's Tuesday Afternoon Book Club. Hello.
Hi, nice to be here.
Okay, so this book focuses on Milena, so tell me about her.
So Milena Jesenská was an author and a resistance fighter in the early part of the 20th century. She was Kafka's first translator, and it was in writing to him to ask him if she could translate his works that they struck up this love affair, which began in letters, and then eventually they ended up having two trysts. And his letters to her were published in a very famous book in the 1950s called Letters to Milena, but we don't really know very much about her because her letters aren't included in that book. Her letters have been lost to time, and it was when I first discovered her story and how much she had achieved in the early part of the 20th century and how much that had been overlooked and how people didn't know about her, that I was like, this woman is incredible and someone deserves to write a novel about her.
But you yourself didn't know about her. So how did you get introduced?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So it was 12 years ago and I was living in London in the UK and I was totally broke. And I found out that there was a fellowship being offered from a university in Vienna and for European journalists. And the fellowship was called the Milena Jesenská Fellowship for Journalists. So I applied for it. And it was in the application that I was like, well, who is Milena Jesenská? Like, I'd never heard of her. And so, I did a Google search and I found a sparsely populated Wikipedia page. But still, I wasn't satisfied. I don't know. There was something in me where I was like, there's something else here. I need to know more. So I went to see if I could find any books about her or written about her. And I found almost everything was written in Czech or in German. And so I was able to find 5 books that had been translated into English. And so I bought all 5. And when I was done reading them, I was like, wow, what an incredible life, what an incredible person, especially outside of her relationship with Kafka, because he died in 1924 from complications of tuberculosis. And she was instrumental in fighting the rise of fascism in Europe. She hid Jews and dissidents in her home. She helped people escape over the border. She contributed to banned publications denouncing the Nazis. And she was arrested by the Gestapo in 1939, and she died in a concentration camp in 1944. And yet all we know of her is this brief tryst that she had with Franz Kafka, and she's kind of a footnote in his story.
And you got all this from the 5 books, or was there more research involved?
Oh, there was so much more research involved. Upon deciding that I was going to write about her, I undertook 4 years of nonstop research. So that meant countless visits to Vienna and Prague, going through the historical record, census records, voter rolls, declassified military files, doing on-site research in the museums. I interviewed one of her biographers. Like, I was it was an all-consuming obsession. It was like this modus operandi. And when I was done my research, I just thought to myself, someone ought to write a novel about her. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, I'm someone.
So, this is a work of historical fiction. So we know who she is. You've given us that. So where does this story take us, Letters to Kafka?
Right. So, as I mentioned, because we don't have her letters to Kafka, all we have is letters to Milena, which is his letters to her. So I decided to fill in the gaps with what I understood about her, of her character, and all the research I had done. And so in my book, I imagine what her letters to him might have said. And I also imagine what might have happened during their trysts, because we don't really know what happened during their trysts. There's mentions and shadows and traces of it in his diaries and her letters to other people, but not in any real expository detail. And so I decided to run with my imagination and take her story 3 times around the dance floor.
What was it like to be in her mind, like writing these letters, or this, like, picturing yourself from her POV?
I have to say it was actually quite a joy, because any writer will tell you that sometimes that blinking cursor of death is just, it's so difficult to just even write a paragraph, and you feel really like, we all have imposter syndrome. But after I'd done my research, I was like, I know her. I can do this. I adore her. Like, she's messy and she's complicated and she's passionate and she's making a lot of mistakes and she's nuanced and she's almost figuring it out. And I just adored that about her.
Can you give me an example of all those things? Like, just something that you fell in love with that you learned about her?
Absolutely. Well, I found out through my research was that she was a pickpocket.
To what end? Was it just a necessity at the time?
No, not Not exactly. I mean, she was she did kind of, move about the intelligentsia circles of Viennese society after the Great War. She was just, she was in an unhappy marriage. Her husband was a philanderer and he wasn't sharing his wages with her, and inflation is through the roof. And so whenever her rich friends would annoy her, she would pick their pockets. But speaking about a complicated person, no one found out about it. She turned herself into the commissariat and was like, I've been thieving, I've been burgling people. And he was like, you're drunk, Milena, go home. So I dig that about her, like she was making mistakes, but she was trying so hard to do the right thing. And I find characters like that endlessly compelling.
I mean, this is a character, this is a figure that you fell in love with, getting to know, and then you're also writing something that you think she was writing from her point of view.
Exactly.
That's a lot of pressure. There's a sense of responsibility in trying to get it right. What was that like for you?
Absolutely, because you have to think about that, like Kafka and Milena were real people, and they still have living family members and descendants to this day. So I knew I had to treat the text with a lot of care and I really pay attention to detail. And that is why I didn't just do a 3-month kind of deep dive into the historical record. I gave myself those 4 years because, you really do want to do the story justice. And, even though it's fiction. And, I really also didn't want my historical fiction novel to feel like it was written by a 21st century Western author. So many times you can read a historical fiction if it's ancient Mesopotamia or, the Victorian period, and you can totally tell it's written by someone who lives in New York, like in 2025. I wanted the book to feel like it was a document that was discovered from that era that we had uncovered. And so I really, poured a lot of myself and the research into the text to really make it feel like we were building this world. It's a very immersive world and you feel like you're in it.
How has she changed you?
Oh my gosh. It's so funny because it's been 12 years from the initial idea to today, which is Pub Day. It's sometimes I find that the past decade, how do I, we're like inextricably linked. Like, how do I separate myself? Where do I end and where does Milena begin? I think a lot of her cues, I take a lot of my cues on integrity from her in the sense that, you have to be bold, you have to be brave, you have to carve out a life for yourself. You have to, you can either let fate befall you or you can choose your fate. And she existed in a time when women were expected just kind of, know their place and keep their voices down and do what their philandering husbands told them to do. And she was like, no, why should the men have all the fun? And so I really kind of take that to heart. And I think that, one tries to live one's life in the same manner. You kind of have to have that kind of dignity going forward and make sure that, it's 2025 and yes, women have all the rights in the world, but we still experience, so much chaos and we're discriminated against in almost every single country. So, if Milena was experiencing that 100 years ago, and she got through it, surely I can do it too. And, and she did it with such dignity and care while at the same time holding true to her values. Yeah.
Wow. And so, putting this out there, how are you feeling? You mentioned today's, launch day.
Yeah.
You dedicated 12 years to this. This is your first novel. Like, what's going through your mind?
Well, I will let you know that I have been popping Pepto-Bismol pills like they're Smarties.
Oh, my. Are they working?
It's working. I'll tell you that right now. I am an absolute ball of anxiety right now.
Okay.
Right after I finish speaking with you, I'm going to go to my launch party. So super excited about that. And just I'm just, after 12 years, I'm also just filled with joy.
You get to share this with the world now.
I get to finally share it with the world. It's no longer mine, and everybody kind of gets to do what they will with the story.
So tell me about this launch event, because it is in the city. It's open to the public. What's happening?
Yeah, so we're having a party at Flying Books, which is a bookstore on College near Ossington, and it starts at 6:30. There's going to be food. There's going to be door prizes. It's being hosted by author Saeed Tibi, who wrote the really popular book, Her First Palestinian, and his forthcoming book is You Will Not Kill Our Imagination. And yeah, we're going to have a book signing. There'll be books for sale. There's going to be a lot of other authors and writers there. So should one be compelled or interested in that kind of literati scene of Toronto, feel free to come on down at 6:30.
Sometimes when I meet a new person and it's a friend introducing me, I say, can you fill me in? What do I need to know about this person before I meet them? So before people meet Milena, the character in this book, this figure. What do you want people to know about Milena as the person who's gotten to know her the last 12 years?
Well, oh gosh, I wrote a whole book about that.
Yeah, before they dive in, what do you want them to know?
How do they dive in? This was a woman who was brazen and brave and had moxie and had gumption at a time when the Great War had just ended. And if you didn't die in the Great War, then the Spanish flu epidemic finished the job. And there's fuel shortages and coal shortages and bread lines and inflation is through the roof. And Milena's like, you know what? I'm going to be an author. Like, it's just so ostentatious. And I dig that about her. So I love the bravery. I love the courage. And she's definitely one of those people who shouldn't just be remembered by the man that she once loved.
Congratulations. This is a big moment.
Of one of the short films premiering at